So here I have a set that I had applied to myself over 6 weeks ago. And just a little backstory, I had done a quick or mini fill on this set about 3 weeks prior to this. So what I did there was just remove the shine from the nails, prep the regrowth area, apply my silicone thin base, cure that, apply my glitter, cure that, and then apply a top coat. So you'll notice that some of these nails, the glitter takes a little bit longer to get all the way through and get off the nail. And that's due to the fact that it has a top coat, a base coat, more glitter, and more top coat on it. Normally it would file much quicker than it does here, but because I did a little mini fill with it, there's a little extra bit on top of everything. I am being careful when I'm filing to remove this because I am using a carbide bit, so I want to make sure that I stay on top of the product and that the carbide bit is not coming into contact with my natural nail, because carbide bits shave and it can remove layers very quickly. So here I'm using the tip of the bit around the left side of my nail, the middle of the bit around the middle of the nail, and then as I come over to the right side, I use the base of the bit to come around that right side of the nail. And I'm always filing toward myself. This gives me good control. Again, up and over around those sidewalls and around the nail folds. Keeping that bit very parallel and, like I said, on top of the product itself, so I'm not filing my natural nail with that carbide bit. Another thing you'll notice is that I never take my bit all the way up to the application line when I'm filing in this direction. I only go most of the way there, and then in order to file around that actual application line, I will come from the sidewall and up and around like this. Because if I file it in that direction where I'm pulling toward me, if I went all the way up to the application line, there's a small chance that if there was something lifted there, my carbide bit could grab a hold of that. And it would, at the very least, startle my client and myself, or it could potentially cause some damage. So we want to make sure we are really careful in how we use these carbide bits in filing product. Now we'll just come in and do a very gentle kind of pushing of the nail folds, lifting them slightly to give us a little bit of room to work and be able to get our product nice and close without touching skin. Using a light touch, it looks like my finger moves a bit just because I can't properly support the entire finger as I'm doing this, but it is a light touch. My nail folds move pretty easily. And now I'll come in with the back side of the cuticle pusher, that blade, and just use this to very gently scrape some cuticle tissue from the nail plate. I can tend to get little calluses along a couple of these sidewalls where I tend to rest tools or pencils, things like that. So just a really light touch, kind of scrape around there and get that cuticle tissue kind of lifted and loosened up a little. So my next step is a little bit easier. And now we'll come in with, this is just a mini rounded tip bit, and I'm just using this up and around those nail folds just to get the cuticle tissue off the nail plate. I generally don't prep the entire nail with this. I just go up and around those nail folds on each of the nails, just getting that cuticle tissue gently filed off. We want to make sure to remove all that cuticle from the nail plate so we get the best possible adhesion of our product to the nail. And I am using a really light touch and this at a low speed. I don't want to overfile the nail plate. So keeping that bit really parallel to each area of my nail. That's why you see me rotating the way I am. And just using a really light touch to make sure that I'm being gentle on my nail plate. Now I'm coming in with a mini barrel bit. Now this one has burrs. The diamond burrs are right on the very end of the bit as well. And I have a variety of different types of bit that do this, but I'm just using the end of that bit to go up against the nail fold to very gently exfoliate these nail folds. I'm not a big fan of cutting tissue around the nails. If it's sticking up and there's a risk of a hangnail, I will trim it with nippers or cuticle scissors, but I prefer to gently exfoliate and just remove some of that dry skin to be as gentle on the skin around the nail as I can. So again, just very gently pushing this bit up against that skin and carefully exfoliating and making sure that the bit does not come into contact with my natural nail, because you can see it has a very square end. And if I touch it to my natural nail, I'm going to have little file grooves in there. So keeping this off my natural nail so I can just very gently exfoliate that skin is all I need to do here. And again, a low speed here as well. It's about 9 to 10,000 RPMs to very gently exfoliate this skin. And now I'll come in with my 180 Grit Magic nail file, and I'm just going to make sure my product is blended flush to the nail plate and that my full regrowth area is gently prepped. So a light touch, here I'm filing to remove a little more product, and then just prepping that regrowth area. So being very gentle on the natural nail plate, and again debulking this area just a little bit, removing some of that product. And then just gently making sure my product is flush to the nail. Sorry, I'm moving a little off. Trying to stay in focus in camera here. Now we'll cleanse, make sure we get all that dust off the nail plate. I did brush these off first as well. Little brush can get into those little grooves better, but cleansing to make sure we get all the dust off. And now our silicone thin base is the base for all magic services. So we can just scrub this into the nail plate very gently using very little product. Just kind of work it into that prepped nail surface. Kind of scrubbing back and forth, making sure we get it down into all of those little scratches. And I don't have to apply this to the entire nail. If I'm applying product over magic, I just apply it to the regrowth area of the nail. But if I'm applying over a different product, if I'm not sure what the product might be, or if it's acrylic, I will do the silicone thin base over not only the natural nail, but the entire product that's already on the nail. Now we will go ahead and cure this for 1 minute. And now we'll do our fill with our Romantic Cool Acrygel. Because we're filling a larger regrowth area, 6 weeks is not the ideal time frame for routine maintenance, but that's what we have here. So I'm going to do this in 2 thinner applications. We don't want to apply too much product at one time because we want to make sure that our product cures properly. So I'm going to start out doing a thin application over the nails, just pushing a little bit of extra product into the regrowth area, but brushing it out smooth and thin over the rest of the nail. Not trying to rebuild the structure of the nail in one application. On this next nail, I'm just pushing a little bit of product up into that regrowth area. I do leave a little bit larger gap between my product and my nail folds with this first layer. So just a very gentle kind of feathering it in there. And then brush it out smooth over the rest of the product on the nail. And you can see as I run my brush over this, you can see the texture of the Acrygel, the acrylic beads that are in the gel. But as it sits there and they self-level, they very quickly sink into the gel. So they disappear and you have a very smooth finish. Again, just pushing product up into that regrowth area. Grab a little more product here. Kind of tuck it up into that corner. And then brush it out smooth over the nail. And again, we have a little extra space, a little more regrowth on my index nail. So we'll kind of push a little more product up in there. Brush it out smooth over the nail. And we'll cure that for 1 minute. Now I'm going to come in with that second layer, and again I'm going to do the same thing, a thin application at first, but I do get just a little bit closer to my nail folds with this layer because it will help it to naturally bevel down flush to the nail plate. So again, just a thin application at first, kind of brushing it out smooth. And now I'll come in with that additional product and fill in that regrowth area and kind of restructure our apex there. So I just lay that little string, and then I like to do a couple smaller strings of product along the side of the nail just to make sure that it's fully rebalanced. Now, if I were doing this fill at 3 weeks, I could have done this part in that first layer as well. But with so much regrowth, I want to make sure that we have it properly balanced and don't have too thick of an application at one time. We want to make sure that our curing is complete. So now I'm just using my number 3 tiniest detail brush to kind of pull the product a little closer to my nail folds. My natural nails, the sidewalls are very deep, so it's hard to get in between the nail plate and the sidewall without the risk of getting product on the skin. So I like to come in with a little smaller brush and make sure that I have my product blended out smooth there. So again, thin application over that second layer, brush it out smooth, and then we'll come back in and apply a bit more product in that regrowth area. You could do this a few different ways. I like to use these little kind of string techniques where I just kind of lay a little bit of product in a few different areas to allow it to self-level. You could also just add another bead and kind of float it over that surface and work it into that regrowth area and blend it out over the nail plate. There's no right or wrong way. The technique that you're most comfortable with and that works best for you is great. So as that's self-leveling, again, I'll just come in and make sure I'm smooth and flush around the nails or around the sidewalls, making sure I don't have any bumps and making sure I don't have any areas where product is missing. So let that self-level. And here I'm just going to add a little bit more because I could see that that needed just a little more for structure. And then I am giving these nails, each of these nails, a flash cure of about 10 seconds before I move on to the next nail. So now we're at the middle nail, applying that, again, that second layer, just kind of tucking it up along those nail folds. Brush it out smooth. Then I'll come in with that additional product and rebuild the regrowth area and that apex. Just kind of laying that in there, kind of dragging it forward so it will blend out smooth. And now I'll take my detail brush and make sure I work those edges. And then we'll get that one a little bit more through that apex and stress area there and give that a flash cure. Now onto the index nail. Again, this one has just a little bit more regrowth area, so we're just going to make sure we get enough product in there to rebuild that properly. I'm pulling that skin along that sidewall back a little so I can get a little closer to the edges. You'll notice my bristles on my brush do not move much. I'm using a light touch when I apply this, so not a lot of pressure. And you'll also notice that the gel is not sticky, you know, it just flows nicely. So adding that in the regrowth area into that apex, and then my extra little strings along the side. And finalizing finishing touches along the nail folds while that's self-leveling. And now we'll go ahead and cure this for 1 minute. And there we are. We're ready for a light finish filing and getting things into shape for decoration. So we'll cleanse. Make sure you cleanse cuticle to free edge so that you're not pushing any of that uncured gel up onto the skin. And then I'm using my 180 grit file here to just refine these. Again, if I was at a 3-week fill with this, I probably wouldn't need to finish file, but because it's been 6 weeks and they just need a kind of an overall rebalance, I'm going to go ahead and file and refine and make sure everything is properly shaped. Just filing to taper the free edge a bit and just get that back into shape. Filing from the stress zone to the free edge, making sure to kind of debulk that. We'll go up and around the nail folds to make sure everything is blended. Up and over that apex to blend that into the rest of the nail. Then I'll finalize here by just making sure I debulk from the stress zone to the free edge. I always like to start along the sidewall here and rotate my file up and onto the nail surface. This allows me to taper the shape and kind of narrow things in without running the risk of removing any structure or strength in my nail or filing away those lower arches. So I'm able to taper the shape and bring it all together. And then we'll file from the stress zone to the free edge to thin that down a bit. I could have reduced more of this bulk in the beginning and saved myself a little bit of finish filing. So up and around the nail folds, blending in that stress zone and apex area. Again, filing to taper the shape a bit, rotating my file up onto the nail surface. And you can see exactly where that file is working there, just along the side walls at the free edge. Up and around the nail folds, and then blending it all together and debulking that stress zone to the free edge. And repeating the same on the index nail, tapering those sidewalls to refine that shape, rolling the file up onto the product, reducing any bulk from the stress zone to the free edge, rotating my file as I do it, filing up and around the nail folds, blending the product flush with the natural nail plate. And then blending everything together. Cleanse with some cleanser and a lint-free wipe, get all that dust off the nail plate, and get ready for some decoration. And now we're ready to make them pretty. Here I'm going to use the Universal Whites, a gel paint, and my number 2 Lines and Swirls brush. And you can see how nicely pigmented this Universal White gel paint is. It's amazing. So light pressure where you want thin lines, a little more pressure where you want the line to be a little heavier. And I'm just going to refine it a little. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill it in with this brush. You could use a larger brush to fill in the white, but I have this one in my hand, so I'm just going to very gently fill in that white. You do want to make sure that this is applied nice and thin. It is a one coat coverage product, so it does apply nice and thin and give you beautiful coverage. You don't want it applied too thick because you want to make sure you're going to reach that optimal cure. So just kind of blending it out smooth here. And then we'll go in and cap all the edges. And I am going to flash cure this for about 10 or 15 seconds. And then we'll come back in with a second line and just follow that same pattern. And kind of swirl that up. A little too much product on my brush. Finish that line off. And again, light touch where you want a thin line, heavier pressure on the bristles where you want your line to be a little thicker. I'm going to add just a little bit more here and make that line a little wider in the center. Now I just want to make sure it matches the pinky. And we'll finish that off and give that a flash cure. And then I'll come in with the glitter and just lay a glitter line in between the two white lines. Just light little touch here. I'm using the number 1 brush. And just kind of feather that glitter in there so you get those pieces kind of spread out nice and even. And we'll go ahead and cure this for a full minute because I have not cured that white completely. So you want to make sure that the white gets a good cure. And then we'll top coat with our Tackless Hyper Shine. So here I'm just wiping off the excess from, apex to free edge, and then taking a little excess off the brush, coming in close to the nail folds and doing a thin application cuticle to free edge. So just a nice thin application over the nail, and we'll cure that for 1 minute. And there we have it, a beautiful finish. I can't wait to hear what you guys think. Share with me in the comments.